So now starting from the top, honest majority is obviously a requirement. It's not sufficient, but it's a requirement. And this kind of resonates with what was mentioned earlier today. Suppose everything is working fine now, and now a majority decides that it wants to abort all the transactions that happened today. They can go back 24 hours ago and start mining from that point, overcoming the entire progress that was done today, and change what happened. So an honest majority, and this was proved more formally, but it's very intuitive, I think. An honest majority is definitely a requirement. Now, what we want for this system to work is that the participants that are completely independent and self-motivated, not to say selfish, they should be motivated to play by the rules. So incentive compatibility is the key. The incentives should be compatible with what we want, so that their best strategy is going to be honest. Which means, as Rafael just said, that the revenue should be proportional to their effort. Whatever effort they're putting into participating, that should be the revenue. If someone is making more than that, it is broken. And what we found is that Nakamoto's blockchain is not incentive compatible over, even with a minority attacker. And selfish mining outperforms honest mining. Now, just to be clear again, let's say you have 25% of the mining power in the system. So when people generate blocks, they guess these hashes, and they guess as quickly as they can to generate as many blocks as they can. If someone is guessing 1 out of every 4 hashes in the entire system, then on average they should win, they should generate 1 in every 4 blocks in the blockchain, on average. So these are going to be blocks, the squares, and here you see we get a fork. Right, so the forks are generated intentionally, and the longest chain wins, right? And so what an attacker performing selfish mining is trying to do is trying to generate a secret fork. So the dashed blocks in red, so red blocks are generated by an attacker, a selfish miner. And if they're dashed, it means the attacker keeps them private. So only the attacker knows of these blocks. And if the line is solid, then it means that the block is public. Everybody in the system sees the block. And the intuition is that we're going to risk some work when we do that. When we generate a block and we keep it private, we risk that the others are going to create a longer chain and we're going to lose the block we generated. But our goal is to cause them, on average, to lose more blocks than we do. So what the attacker does, it forms a secret branch. So if there at the top, it's the head of the blockchain, the very last block. And the attacker generates a block, he keeps it secret. And if it already has some secret blocks and some published blocks from earlier, we'll talk about how this comes to be, but if this is the situation, and the attacker is able to generate another block, he keeps it secret as well. So he tries to create as long a secret chain as possible. And it does so. So meanwhile, the honest players are generating their blocks, right? And they are the majority. This is the interesting story, when the honest players are the majority. So because they're a majority, eventually, and pretty quickly, they're going to reach the point, reach the attacker's lead and close it. And so just before that happens, so when the honest parties generate a block that is almost as long as the secret block, the attacker publishes its 2 final blocks. So now the longest public chain is the attacker's chain, and the honest parties lose their blocks. And I'll emphasize that I'm assuming here that there is no latency. So this is looking kind of at the current Bitcoin parameters, where blocks are generated every 10 minutes, so this is a good approximation. So now let's look at the risk. Let's say that the attacker already has the secret block generated. And now the honest parties, they generate their own block, and it competes. They don't know the attacker's block, so we have a fork. Only the attacker knows of this fork. And what we do in this case is that we publish this block. And then we have a race, right? We have 2 blocks here, one by the attacker and one by the honest parties. And then three things can happen. At the top, you see the situation where the honest parties follow their own block. At the bottom, the attacker follows its own block. And there's also a chance that when the attacker published its secret block earlier, some honest parties heard about it before they heard of the other honest block. Okay, so they don't know. They can't tell who's honest and who's malicious or selfish. And so they might generate an honest block, not part of the attacking group, that follows the block generated for selfish mining. Now, I'll talk later on about why this is possible, but intuitively it sounds kind of difficult to do, right? Because the attacker publishes its secret block only after seeing the honest block. But then we're saying that sometimes honest parties are going to hear about it before the other block, which was started being published earlier. This is possible because of the properties of the network. And for the purpose of our analysis, we're not going to go into exactly how much the attacker can achieve this. We're just going to parameterize it by this gamma. So for gamma equals 0, it never happens. The honest parties only follow their own block. And for gamma equals 1, we're going to be in the center. So the attacker is always able to do what's called rushing. He's able to see another message and publish it to everyone before it actually reaches the honest parties. Now, the main question about this is why is this even good for the attacker? Right? The attacker actually loses blocks that end up being off the main chain, and the block off the main chain is not providing any revenue for the attacker. So the honest guys are losing more blocks. I'll try to convince you, but why is the attacker's revenue going to grow? And the answer is that the difficulty of the main blockchain is adjusting itself. So that blocks are always generated at a set interval. For Ethereum, it's one interval. For Bitcoin's blockchain, it's another interval, and other cryptocurrencies choose different values, but they all try to generate blocks at the same rate, average rate. Which means that what matters is the ratio of your blocks within the main chain. So the revenue of the attacker is its ratio of blocks in the main chain divided by all blocks in the main chain. So part of the reason for how this protocol was formulated was that it allows fairly convenient analysis. And we're going to do a Markov chain here. And this is how it's going to work. We're going to represent the states of the system by the lead of the attacker against the honest parties. So if there's here at the 0, there is just one head of the chain, the attacker has no lead, so it's 0. And then here at 2, the attacker has secret blocks, 2 secret blocks that the honest parties are not aware of. So this is 2. It could be 1 and 3, and it could be 0 and 2. Or it could be 100 and 102, it doesn't matter. 3, 4, and so on. And the 0 is going to be just a single head, and 0 prime is going to be our base condition. And note that because of the way we're running we know that the honest parties follow Nakamoto's protocol.
The top one should be all 3 dash, right?
Yes, thank you. All 3 dash. So because of the way the system is constructed, we know that these are the only possible states. In principle, you could imagine others, but the way our system works, we have the honest parties following Nakamoto and the selfish mining following our protocol, selfish miner following our protocol, so these are the only possible states. And now let's see what happens. So at a rate of alpha, which is how we denote the attacker's mining rate out of all the mining power in the system, we go to the right, so the attacker increases its lead. And at a rate of 1 minus alpha, we go left, so the honest parties find blocks and the lead decreases. And then, of course, if we have a 0 and the attacker finds a block, we go to 1. And at 2, if the honest party finds a block, we don't go back to 1, we go to 0, because the attacker publishes what it has. If we have no lead, so just the honest head of the blockchain and the honest parties find a block, we stay at 0. And then if we have a lead of 1, so the attacker has a lead of 1, and then the honest parties find a block, then we have the race condition. And from the race condition, we have these 3 options of going back down, which are a function of both alpha, the attacker's size, and gamma, the probability of the attacker being able to rush. So to analyze this, we just form a set of equations. So each of the lines, I'm not going to go through all the details, but each of these lines, we know that the system goes at the same rate from left to right or from right to left. And so we're able to form these 4 equations. Oh, this is actually more than 4. This is to infinity. So we have almost an equation for every state, and then we know that the system is always in some state, so the sum of probabilities of staying in any state is 1. So you solve this and you get an expression. You know the system's probability to be in every state, and then you ask yourself, okay, so now what are the revenues? And this is how we count them. So every time we go from right to left on the long part of the chain, whenever the honest party finds a block, we lose 1 step of the lead. And so at this point, we count the block that the attacker found. This is just the counting. And then if we go from 2 to 0, we count the 2 blocks, and the honest parties get nothing. At 0, if the honest parties find a block, they get that revenue. We know it's going to stay on the main chain. And then when we move from a lead of 1 to a race, we can't count anything. We don't know what is going to happen. But according to the path we take from 0 prime to 0, we count either 2 honest blocks, 1 honest block, 1 attacker block, or 2 attacker blocks. So you get these equations at the bottom, and now we start reaching the bottom line. So if the attacker's position on the network, on the minor network in the system, if it's limited, so it just has a single computer connected somewhere, then it's not going to be able to rush. When it hears of a block, already everybody has heard about it. And so the threshold for an attacker is going to be 1/3. Above 1/3 is going to succeed with this attack. And here you see, as a function of gamma, starting from 0 and going all the way to 1, the threshold size for an attack being profitable. At 0, we hit 1/3, and at 1, of course, this is the second case, so the attacker is able to perfectly, it's a rushing adversary, it's always able to send its message earlier. Then an attacker of any size is better off attacking because there is no risk. There is no race. Whenever there is a race, the attacker is always going to win. Now, why is this possible? The reason is that why we believe it is possible. We don't really know the properties of the system, but the line protocol, the network protocol of Bitcoin is very aggressive about making sure everybody hears about everything, but not necessarily fast. It's not worried about doing it rapidly. And so if an attacker is able to position itself at a lot of points within the network, and the only thing it does is try to propagate its own blocks faster than the honest blocks, that's enough for doing a selfish mining attack. Doing something like this is not going to allow you to do what Aviv has described yesterday of partitioning the network. That's difficult. This is easy. We're not trying to prevent messages from passing, we're just trying to send our own messages quicker. And why is this such a big issue? Because the revenue of a pool, the relative revenue of a pool per mining power unit, as a function of the attacker's size, the attacking pool size, grows superlinearly. So wherever you are, you're making more than linear progress by going to the right. What does this mean? It means that, well, a rational player that sees a pool past the threshold making more revenue than by playing honestly, he's going to want to join the pool and earn more than he can. But for the pool, because of the superlinear growth, for the pool it's also beneficial to have them join in. the per mining power unit, they're going to make more than they did without the new guy. And so this encourages the selfish pool to grow, and motivation tends towards 50%. Now what happens at 50% is a different story altogether, because the entire analysis is based on the fact that the honest parties are a majority and they're always going to close the gap. So I'm not going to discuss that, but having the pools grow in such a way towards 50%, at this point the entire system loses its basic premise. It's not decentralized anymore. We have almost majority pool and we're not decentralized. So looking at this reasoning for why an attacker is able to achieve selfish mining even with possibly very small mining power, what we suggest is to replace the tie-breaking strategy. So right now, if a Bitcoin node, and I'm saying Bitcoin specifically, receives two blocks competing, a race, it is going to follow the first block it has heard about. Protocol decision. And this gives the decision to the network, and the network is vulnerable in this way. So what we're saying instead, choose uniformly at random between all racing blocks you're aware of. So if you know of multiple chains of equal length, you choose uniformly at random between them. And with this you get a threshold against the selfish mining I just described at 1/4 of the mining power. So an attacker larger than 25% is going to be able to increase its revenue with this. Smaller, no, yeah, please.
Is the pool itself resilient to deviations? Namely, if you're part of the pool, should you be participating in the pool's protocol? Or is there a deviation which is even more profitable for you knowing that the others are part of the pool?
I wanted to talk about pools in a little bit, and there is an interesting answer that combines attacks on pools and attack on this, but we haven't explored the question of what can you do if you know that someone is playing selfishly. What's the best response to that? That's I don't have an answer for that yet.
Then you might rule out the existence of the pool. It would never materialize because people know that they're joining something where people will deviate from.
The way we view the participants is this is rational. So I believe that the miners and the pools are all rational. They're trying to maximize the revenue. So if I tell you, join my pool, we're going to make more money together.
But I don't believe you, because once I join your pool, I know that you will deviate from the pools.
This is not about...
Rational as well.
No, this is about the entire pool deviating from the protocol. So I want you to join my pool, and I will prove to you that I'm behaving maliciously like this, because we're both going to profit from it. And my profit is going to increase because you joined me.
I don't know how much we discuss this. I'm asking furthermore. So your profit is going to increase, but it could increase even more, if you convince me to join, and thereafter you do something else.
Right.
And therefore, to begin with, I will not join.
This is just an excellent transition to the next part of the presentation. But I want to say a few more things about this, and then I hope I will answer your question in full. So I want to say a couple of general things. First of all, about disclosure. Disclosure in the blockchain world is a difficult question. How do you disclose something like this responsibly? The path we chose is just to put it online and let the community handle it. At the time, Bitcoin was almost the only player, and it was very clear who to communicate with there. Today, there are a whole bunch of protocols that all use similar algorithms. If you find a flaw with the algorithm, then you need to access a lot of different groups, and even if they find the problem and devise a patch, the patch still doesn't apply until it is actually deployed at all the participants. So I don't know if we found the best answer, but I still don't have a better one. So this is a question that repeats itself as others find more issues. Second, this is a practical attack. For obvious reason, we didn't publish any code, but you run some coordinator that places nodes inside a network, and the coordinator takes mining results or new blocks from your own and tells the different nodes when they want to publish in order to achieve rushing as much as possible. And what's worse is that large enough pools exist, perhaps by a collaboration of 2, maybe 3 pools in most strong currencies, all of them. So this is a real problem that calls for a solution. Fruit Chain already made a big progress in that, assuming you heard Raphael's talk just now. Our fix, the switch to random, was actually adopted by Ethereum. So Ethereum, instead of taking the first block it hears of, it does a random choice. Bitcoin chose not to do that. They said, we're optimistic. We're thinking the threshold currently stands at 1/3. But what's more, we're thinking that the attacker doesn't know if the threshold stands right now at 1/3 or less. By putting it squarely at 1/4, we're giving the attacker a guarantee. So an attacker at 26% knows for a fact that it's going to succeed. And so Bitcoin said, we prefer to leave it ambiguous or unknown, and the protocol stayed as it is. And finally, there are already improvements which I won't say anything about because the author is here and he will talk about them for optimal selfish mining. This is Aviv giving the next talk. So, I'm not going to give the summary again, but I'm going to talk a little bit about pools and what happens with pools. So maybe questions about selfish mining now? That's a good point to pause. Yeah.
Can't honest miners also have their network distribution? Better network distribution?
Yes, they can. There are a couple of options like fiber and our Falco network that is facilitating fast block propagation, which is supposedly not critical for correctness of the protocol. It improves performance in a way, and it helps against selfish mining, only these solutions typically are very centralized. So you're placing a lot of trust in the fast propagation relays to really be honest and not, because if these guys now participating in an attack like this, they have total control. Yeah.
How much evidence do we have of selfish mining taking place on Bitcoin as it currently stands?
So every so often you get this mail saying, hey, look, I think our pool is not what it's supposed to. And by and large, by running rigorous statistical tests, the answer is no. I know specifically of one fellow who wrote that he tried and he had some issues with his implementation. And whenever you have an issue with an implementation, you lose 12.5 Bitcoin per month. If it is happening, it's a little bit difficult to tell because the the pruned blocks that are being cut off the chain might not be propagated at all. Blockchains tend to only propagate the blocks that are part of the main chain. But I'm not aware. There isn't public knowledge of a selfish mining attack being successful against a major cryptocurrency. Yeah.
Someone wants selfish mining. How easy would it be to detect it just from looking at the network?
Not easy. Not easy. You don't have enough data, and sometimes it happens by coincidence that you have a couple of blocks being published together. So it's not trivial, and it's a statistical test, right? It has to happen consistently for a very long time and done correctly, and then It is possible. So at the time, there was a website that constantly ran this test. So at any point in time, you could see the probability of a selfish mining attack taking place right now. And usually it was very low. At times it was high, but then if you opened up the statistics and looked at it, turned out that it wasn't, there was the statistically significant proof. Yeah.
We know that mining pools are also more beneficial because their connected miners will be known in advance, will be known faster for a new block arrive, because they can transfer from the rest of the network to work on the new blocks. So that's another advantage for mining pools. We have a superlinear profit. My question is this specific scenario of profit is negligible according in comparison to what you presented?
Yeah. For Bitcoin, generally, yes. And the reason is that the block interval is huge. So the chances of actual collisions are pretty small. The parties that suffer from that are the smaller pools, not the larger ones. And that's the reasons for the relay networks on top of Bitcoin that are trying to make to even the playground, so that small miners are going to get their fair share. It works well enough so that small mining groups do exist. So maybe I'll try to move forward and talk a little bit about the miner's dilemma. So this is an entirely different story going towards pooled mining. So pooled mining, as Rafael mentioned, we have many miners and there is a constant block rate. So only one winner every, let's say, 10 minutes or 15 seconds, but infrequently. And so it takes a long time for an individual player to actually win a block. And this is a financial endeavor that they're taking, and they want to see revenue. They want to see a stable revenue per day, or at least per week. And so they form these pools. They join together and they work with a pool, and the pool communicates with the blockchain. And it's kind of good because it allows you to mine with a small mining facility. You participate in the pool, and so you have more mining power in the network. But it reduces the actual verification, the verification diversity, the number of different entities that verify the network. So the pool manager, the one running this blue machine at the top, he's the only one that is actually verifying that what happens in the network is correct. The small ones don't have to do that. And you don't really need huge pools. This is from a couple of days ago. This is the size of pools in Bitcoin. Ethereum is similar. Both are similar across a long range of long period. So it looks kind of like this. You have huge pools. There is no reason for that. Much smaller pools would work, but miners aren't altruistic in even at that level of trying to work with many small pools. They just go to the one with the nicest interface and join it. And this has been an issue, and mostly it's about community pressure, asking miners nicely and not succeeding to behave better. And it turns out that there is actually a natural process that deters these large coalitions. Even though a large pool can actually masquerade as several small ones, it is still vulnerable, and the following is going to happen. So let me show you why. So this is the model of the system. This is how it works. We have a blockchain, and logically, the blockchain is sending a puzzle to the pool. We know all the story, right? It's a block, and the pool is trying to generate a new block and solve the hash, but logically, this is what happens. So the blockchain sends the puzzle to the pool sends the puzzle to the miners. The miners send back to the pool not only the full proof of work, but also partial proofs of work. These are the yellow ones. So they almost solve it. And then the pool is able to know how much effort each miner put in. And then it sends just the full proof of work to the blockchain that doesn't care at all about partial proofs of work. This is the block. And it gets money from the blockchain. So within some time, it is able to get the money from the Coinbase transaction in the block. And then it distributes the money among the miners in 10 minutes. And you're going to hear a little bit about how to do this correctly, how to distribute the money fairly. But for our purpose now, let's just assume it's completely fair. So each miner gets its fair share out of the pool. So here's the attack. Let's say we have this attacking pool on the left, and it has some miners it's working with. It's giving them the puzzles they're going to solve back, and we have the blockchain at the bottom, and at the right, we have another pool. Note that the other pool has a different puzzle, right? It's solving its own block, gaining its own revenue. So each of them has its own puzzle and its own miners. So the pool block withholding attack is going to work as follows. The attacker, the attacking pool, is going to utilize some of its mining power and register to the other pool as if it was a miner. The other pool can't tell, and so it sends its own puzzle to the attacking pool. Now the attacking pool is going to give, you see at the top right here, it's going to give the other pool's puzzle to some of its own miners. And so it's working for the other pool. But it's going to withhold, actually discard the full solution and only send the victim pool the partial solutions. So the victim pool is not gaining anything from these solutions. Now it's called withholding and not discarding for historical reasons. The name caught on and it's too late to change it, but it's really discarding the full proof of work. Now, this approach was known for a long time as a way to attack, to sabotage a small pool. And this can be done if you want. So you have a rival pool that's taking miners away from you, and you have enough power, so you use that power in order to cause the other pool to lose money. If they don't have enough money at the bank, they're going to have to close down their operations, and you're going to remain alone in the world. But what I found out is that actually you can actually make money by doing this. It's not just a sabotage. You can directly increase your income. And the reason that this happens is that there are several factors at play here. So for the attacking pool, there's less direct mining power. This is true. And there's also money flowing from the victim to the attacker, because the victim, it doesn't know that it was cheated. It thinks that the attacker, registered as a miner, just didn't happen to find a full solution. And so it sends money back as if it was participating nicely. And finally, and this is critical, like what happened in the selfish mining analysis, we have less actual mining power going down to the blockchain because we're discarding full solutions. So the difficulty of the blockchain goes down, and we're able to get more blockchain, more cryptocurrency per mining power unit. So the analysis is at a stable state, at an equilibrium. What happens at an equilibrium? It works for any pool size. So I'm going to look typically at two pools, but these two pools don't have to be the only two pools in the system. I'm just looking at two pools in the system. And there is a single feasible equilibrium point, as we'll see. So if one pool attacks the other with some infiltration rate x12, from 1 to 2, then the game is very short. It's just one round. The attacker optimizes how much power it wants to use in order to attack the small pool and gain the most revenue, as much revenue as it can. So these are a little bit tricky to read, but you see the victim size going from 0 to 1 maximum at the bottom, and the attacker size going from 0 to 1 at the y-axis. And the only feasible range is at the bottom left, because after that it's more than 1. And in the entire range, it is more beneficial to attack than not to attack. So it doesn't matter what the attacker's size is and what the victim size is. The attacker is better off by taking some of its mining power and using it to attack. It's going to be more than one revenue for the attacker in the entire range. And the implications are for the general case, so it doesn't matter what's the rest of the story from now on, but just mining honestly is not an equilibrium. So showing what I just showed you shows you that everybody should be attacking. Staying at this state is not an equilibrium. So if nobody is attacking, they're both okay. If one is attacking, then it's happy and the other one suffers badly. But what happens if both attack? So now the game takes several rounds until it converges. So pool 1 optimizes its attack, chooses its optimal infiltration rate, and then its revenue changes. And the second pool now has to update its own infiltration rate at pool 1, and so its revenue is updated. Now that its revenue is updated, the income from the infiltration rate for pool 1 changes, and so it goes on and on. But even after you do that, you need to wait for the revenues to converge, and in the interest of time, I'm not going to prove to you that it converges. Sorry. But this is the bottom line. This is the case of two pools attacking. So they both optimize, and each point, so this is just an arbitrary point on the board, but this, the X is the same experiment. So you see at the top the infiltration rates from 1 to 2 and from 2 to 1, which is obviously symmetric. And at the bottom, the revenues. Now the revenue here are not uniformly positive. There are some points at the top here and at the top here where both of them lose money. Where one wins and the other loses. But what's interesting is this region, right? The lower bottom. Here, both pools are minorities. At these triangles, one pool is a majority. The system is already entirely broken. It's not decentralized. There's nothing to talk about. But here, within the relevant region of operation, both pools lose. So they don't lose as badly as they did if one attacked and the other didn't. But they still lose compared to the situation where neither has attacked. Which means that they're always better off attacking. So if the other pool doesn't attack, you're better off attacking. If the other pool does attack, you're better off attacking. So you'll make more or you'll lose less. I want to say this is actually a good thing, because it means that having a large open pool where anyone can join just opens you to attack. You're better off running your small mining operation and not forming these huge pools. So this is a natural process that works against the tendency for pools to grow to infinity. So there are current measures, and the bottom line is that they don't generally work. You need to actually change the protocol in order to fix that. Now, I claim that you don't want to fix that, but by changing the protocol and preventing the miners from knowing whether their solution is a full solution or a partial solution, and there are ways to do that, you're going to overcome the issue of the miner's dilemma in the mining block withholding attack. So there are open questions, and if you want to work on these topics, I'd love to speak with you. Just one promotion of work published by others at the CCS right now. They actually combine the two attacks. So this might go back to the question I had earlier. They combine the two attacks. They ask, what if we use pool block withholding, but we don't discard the solution, we actually withhold them. And we might publish them when someone else competing against the pool publishes its own block. And they're able to show that in this case, by doing this kind of attack, you actually get no dilemma. And this attack is still not optimal. So there's still a lot to look into here. Thank you.